welcome to everyone who is joining, both internal folks at Danny, welcome to you, and then our many external folks. I don't know if everyone can see these. I've never seen these before. They're like floating thumbs up signs. I'm feeling very affirmed and applause, and this is amazing. I don't know how to do that with my machine. I'll have to learn later. But thank you also to the panelists, not just for joining us for this hour, but for the extraordinary work that you're doing every day. So just to set the frame a little bit, and then I'll try to really kind of fade into the background. We'll hear from our experts. This is a part of a new series we're doing here at Danny to highlight pressing issues in our borough, in our city. And I think equally as important to highlight the people who are taking the laboring oar to address it, both here at Danny and the great leadership we have on this issue, and then our partners, because as we all know here, and I hope the public knows, we're a piece of the puzzle, right? But we obviously cannot address it without our great community partners and obviously our partners in law enforcement. So with that, I was thinking, just to kind of set the stage for what we'll do, I was going to ask each panelist to just, maybe we'll do it popcorn style, and we're on a Zoom. Introduce yourself, briefly, just your title and background, and then I have a question for each panelist to kind of get us started, and then we'll sort of open it up, and I'll have questions for the entire group. So we can proceed that way. That would be great. No one's saying no, so we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll start with our very own Justin McNabney, and then Justin, just popcorn it to whoever you want to popcorn it to.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, DA Bragg, and thank you to everyone who's joining us. My name is Justin McNabney. I'm the chief of the Human Trafficking Response Unit here at the Manhattan DA's office. And we are very lucky to have one of our team members with us on the panel today, so I'll pass it to her, Melissa Martinez.
Oh, you're muted, Melissa, which it wouldn't be a Zoom if it didn't happen at least once.
Sorry about that. So thank you, Justin. Thank you, Alvin. My name is Melissa Martinez. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the Human Trafficking Response Unit. My work in the office started in 2008 when I began working with victims of child abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault. But I came across several victims of human trafficking in 2010, and I was struck by the services that they needed and was really inspired to help figure out a way to develop service provisions that would really better address what we were seeing in the office. So I returned to school, obtained my master's in social work degree, and then I pioneered a social work role integrated in the prosecution process for the Human Trafficking Response Unit. I currently provide clinical services for this population, and I collaborate with our amazing prosecution team every single day. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it to Dawn.
Hi, so good afternoon. I'm so happy to be here today to talk about our work and of course this amazing topic. And so my name is Dawn Rowe. I'm the president and CEO of GirlVal and the National Task Force for Missing and Murdered Women and Girls of Color. GirlVal is a gender-specific mentoring program for girls impacted by the foster care and the juvenile justice system. We've been around since 2015, working throughout the entire New York City area. And I also oversee a national task force for missing and murdered women and girls of color, which of course relates directly to this topic. And so the task force is really important because what it does is it looks at and addresses the issues of missing and murdered women and girls of color, particularly the silence that revolves around that. And I'll pass it to Pamela.
Well, thank you, Dawn. I kind of figured you was going to do that. Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank our DA Bragg for creating this atmosphere, providing the space for us to begin this discussion. Well, excuse me, not begin, but continue this discussion. As Dawn stated, my name is Pamela. I'm Pamela Damon. I'm the executive director for Not on My Watch. Not on My Watch is an organization that was started in 2013. Our primary focus was to bring awareness to New York City regarding the epidemic of human trafficking and sexual assault and violence. So our focus was on providing training. We would go to churches, community-based organizations. Wherever the doors were open, we would walk through the doors to provide training, to bring awareness to the dangers and of human trafficking. Within 8 years after starting, we realized that we really need to go further. We needed to look at ways of preventing human trafficking. It's great to provide the information, but how do we take that step to say, okay, we need to stop it before it starts? So we started looking into education. We started providing training, workshops, programs that was specifically designed to address the needs of bringing awareness to the community. Our primary focus is really at this point is working with our young girls between the ages of 10 and 14, because that's where trafficking really begins. And I know we'll go further into that, but as Not on My Watch has grown, not only are we working with our young girls, but we work with our women on sexual assault and domestic violence. We're looking into homelessness. We're looking into providing shelters and a grand resource of information. We want to be the go-to for human trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault. We want to be that organization within New York City, have our boots to the ground and saying we're not losing another soul. So once again, I'm excited to be here. I'm very long-winded, so I'm gonna stop right now and I'm gonna tag Jayne. Jayne, it's on you.
Thank you so much, Pamela. First of all, thank you, DA Bragg, for inviting me to speak today, and also for your amazing team. I've been very fortunate to work with both Justin and Melissa through the years, who've done a lot to keep the young people that I work with safe. So I work at Covenant House, New York, where we serve young adults experiencing homelessness and human trafficking between the ages of 16 and 24. Many of us, I think, see our building right when you get out of the Lincoln Tunnel. There's this big Dove sign. And recently, about a couple months ago, we opened a big, beautiful building that looks nothing like a shelter, filled with dance rooms and music rooms and a gym. And we serve over 200 vulnerable young New Yorkers a night and about 2,000 a year. And we're part of an international federation. We have over 33 sites, both in the United States, 4 in Latin America, and 2 in Canada. And why this issue is so important to us is because sadly, the pimps and traffickers prey off of our young people. And I'll go into this a little more later, but recent research shows that as many as 20% of our young people have had experiences that fit the New York State definition of human trafficking. So if you're talking, we serve 2,000 young people a year, that is several hundred people right here from New York City. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jayne, and thanks to all of you. I'm looking forward to hearing more. I promise I will mix the order up, but I'll go back to Justin to start again. Just maybe to help us kind of set the stage, particularly for people who are new to this area, even some of your colleagues who may be working in related areas but haven't done human trafficking work. Just to kind of, what is human trafficking, and for all the law and order and other watchers out there, how does it differ from what's portrayed in TV and film? Not to pick on one show. But.
Sure. So we in the human trafficking unit here at the Manhattan DA's office, we have approximately 20 prosecutors who work on human trafficking cases. We have 5 investigative analysts. We have a dedicated social worker who you've now met, Melissa Martinez, and we have 2 dedicated investigators and a data engineer, all of whom work specifically in our unit. And to answer the question, DA Bragg, we focus on 2 different kinds of cases. So human trafficking really breaks down into 2 categories: sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And each one has a specific definition under our law in the state of New York. I'm not going to read the law because I know there are many non-lawyers who are joining us, but I'll tell you just in general, sex trafficking means forced or coerced prostitution, and labor trafficking means forced or coerced labor. So sex trafficking really is a subset of labor trafficking, and labor trafficking can be any kind of labor as long as it is forced or coerced in some way. And the law sets out a number of ways in which we criminalize the coerced or forced labor or prostitution. Again, I won't go through all of them, but I'll give the audience some idea of what they are. So for example, if you give someone a narcotic drug in order to impair their judgment so that they will engage in prostitution, that is a method of coercion that is criminalized by the sex trafficking statute. Or if you threaten to call ICE, or you threaten to have someone deported because in order to coerce them to engage either in prostitution or any other kind of labor, that is either sex trafficking or labor trafficking under our law. And then as a third example that we often see, if you require someone to do a specific kind of work, whether that be prostitution or any other kind of work in order to repay a debt, and it can be a real debt or it can be a made up debt, but you cannot require someone to engage either in prostitution or in some kind of labor to repay a debt. That would be sex trafficking or labor trafficking under our law. So that gives you an idea of what we're talking about. What we're not talking about, and these are the common misconceptions, is there is no requirement that there be any kind of kidnapping or unlawful imprisonment. A lot of people think of trafficking as something that happens, the van pulls up on the sidewalk and you grab the person and then you take them and you force them to engage in prostitution or labor. That happens occasionally, but that isn't required under the law. Many times our survivors actually begin the work for their traffickers consensually. And it is only after there is an established relationship that the trafficker begins to coerce that labor or that prostitution. The other thing that's not required, and I think this is a common misconception just because it's cold trafficking, there is no requirement under our law that there be transportation. So we're not talking necessarily about survivors who are brought in from out of the country or brought in from other states or even brought in from other places in New York. Many of our survivors are born and raised in New York City, and many of our traffickers are born and raised in New York City. So there's no requirement under the law that the trafficker move their victims from one place to another. That does happen, but it isn't a requirement under the law.
Thanks so much for that kind of setting the stage of the law. And that reminded me, I failed to do some housekeeping up front, which is thanks to our legal education team. CLE is being offered for this, and so if you've signed up, you've given us your email, you'll get an email from our legal education team with material and instructions to get the credit. And at some point during this hour, I think we will get the code that is required. So just wanted to mention that. So Pamela, I'll go to you next. You mentioned in your initial overview of the age when we see this activity beginning. And I'm wondering, one, if you could repeat that, because I thought it was really helpful to know, and then how you as an expert in terms are recognizing that, and how those of us who are not experts, how you train community members to recognize the signs of human trafficking.
Okay, right. Thank you, ZA. It's a sad fact. Human trafficking starts, the general age is between 12 and 14. Now, let's not get caught up in that because it can be younger. We've had cases of children being rescued as young as 3 years old for regarding sex trafficking. And the age can go up. It can be, you could be in your 20s, 30s, 40s. But the primary age is 12 to 14. That's the age where the traffickers, who are known also as groomers, because they groom these girls and these boys into this life, they're able to groom them because they're still developing. They're still developing who they are. They're still trying to understand where they fit into this big world. Their self-esteem and self-confidence at this age is a lot of times is very low. And the groomers understand that. And they prey on that particular area of self-esteem or self-doubt, or, you know, they'll see a young girl on the internet and she's putting up pictures and she's saying, oh, I don't know if I like this picture. Nobody likes me. You know, my parents don't understand me. Everybody hates me. All of the teenage angst and pre-teenage trauma that we go through. But the groomers are looking at this and they have become experts. So they're preying on this. They're seeing this young girl or young boy who is feeling alienated. So the groomer is going to feed into that and tell them, you know what, I'm your friend. I appreciate you. You're great. Let me help you. I want to know who you are. I want to know more about you. So just as Justin said, most groomers, traffickers are someone that we know, that our victims know, because they have connected with them. They could connect with them in school. They're their friends in school. You know, the girl sitting in your class right at your desk. And you're telling her how you know, your family doesn't have a lot of money and you want to get your nails done, your hair done, you want to buy the latest outfit. So this groomer, who has probably been treated the same way, now they're having to bring in additional victims. So they are now grooming their classmate. Oh, girl, I can help you get your hair done. The boy that wants to play basketball but doesn't have the right sneakers. Dude, I can help you get your sneakers. And so it goes on from there. First they befriend them, and now they're obligated to them. And so the white van that you see slowly driving down the road, no, that's not really happening in the New York City. It's someone that you know that has tapped into your weakness, and now they're playing on them. They're playing on what you need, what you have displayed. And so my area of tactic is one area, is awareness. We have to be more informed. We have to know the lingo. We have to know the signs. We have to know tattooing. We have to know that if a young girl runs away, the biggest thing I hear, oh, did she run away? Oh, you know, she's being a fresh girl. And then she comes back home and they think it's okay. Traffickers, and DA, you're so right. Traffickers are not holding you hostage. They're not trying to pay for you to keep you someplace. They're going to let their victim go. But now they have traumatized this victim, threatened this victim, say, if you don't come when I call, one, I'm gonna tell everyone what you've done. I may kill your family, you know. So these are the things that's happening to our victims in our community, and our city is not aware of this. They're thinking that, you know, and Hollywood is great, but that's causing a big problem for us, because that's what they're thinking that trafficking is all about. You know, I've had a family practitioner. I was talking to her about what I do for a living, and now mind you, she's a family practitioner. When I told her I was working in the area of human trafficking, she says, but that doesn't happen here. And that scared me, because I said, this is a family practitioner. She should be on the ball, that she should know the signs. She should know the symptoms. She should know that it's happening right here in her neighborhood. So we have to become more involved. We have to do more training. We have to provide the word that there is this epidemic going on. So that's my purpose, is to get out there in the streets. And if I got to kick your door down to have you sit down and listen to me, then that may be what I'll have to do. But it's so important that we put our voices out there. I always say sing. Silence is never golden. Now you know, act like you know.
All right.
And that's what Not on My Watch is all about.
All right. Silence is never golden. I'm gonna remember that.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Jayne, I wanted to go to you next. You said in your opening remarks, I think that about 20% of the population that Covenant House serves, is targeted with conduct that fits within the definition of human trafficking. And I'm curious, what can law enforcement be doing better to address that specific issue, which is obviously troubling?
Right. Well, first of all, we have such a great relationship with your team at Covenant House New York, and they've helped us through the years on cases because the pimps do target our young people. They actually, stand near our building and target, and they lie to our young people on the way in. They'll say things like, the cub is full, don't go there, they don't have any beds, come with me, when that's not true at all. We actually have to fight to keep them off of our property. Often, sometimes they'll send one young woman in to recruit others to go with them. And that always breaks my heart because that young woman is also a victim, right? But we can't let them stay there because they're putting other people's lives in danger. So, I mean, at first, I will definitely get to the law enforcement piece, but I also just wanted to say, like, Pamela, thank you because you've got that spot on. Like, I think the public's perception of what trafficking is so different. In fact, the trafficked young people that I work with, they don't even know that they've been trafficked, right? A lot of times they think that, they're doing this for their boyfriend who they love. It's much more similar, I think, to dating violence, where they alternate between this pretend love and affection that our young people are just so desperate for, and then beating them up the next day. So, I mean, at Covenant House, the first thing we have to do is identify them, right? They don't come in and say, help me, I've been trafficked. They say, I need a bed, I'm hungry. So we had to learn to ask the right questions over the years to get them services. For the most part, I think law enforcement's doing an amazing job. I have Justin's number on my phone. I have Melissa's number on my phone. I've got like lots of NYPD in my phone. Extremely responsive. A few things though, and I don't think law enforcement can do on its own. It might require a change in law. It's that usually law enforcement pays more attention when the person is under the age of 18. And I think it's much easier to prove a trafficking case if someone is under the age of 18. But the young people I work with are primarily 18, 19, and 20. And something magical doesn't happen, right? A lot, like Pamela was saying, a lot of our young people have been trafficked at 11, 12. And all of a sudden on their 18th birthday, like they're not, consensually in the sex trade. So, finding ways to protect those 18 and 19-year-olds. In fact, our research shows that while, yes, the age of entry is so heartbreakingly young, 18 and 19 is a particularly vulnerable age. And there's a few reasons for that. And that is, pimps are smart, right? They know that law enforcement really cares about having sex with minors. So they like to go for young-looking 18 and 19 years olds to pass them off as children, right? And age 18 is also the first time you can be legally homeless, right? You can sign yourself out of foster care. Your grandma can kick you out of the street. So these pimps are really, really savvy. They know to pounce when someone is first homeless. So again, I think we need a change in law, but more could be done for that older age group. And then just the last point is something I saw that you put out, Bragg, that I was really excited about is we are seeing more young people with intellectual disabilities, right? So they might be 19 years old by the law, but they're, maybe they have the capacity of an 11 or 12-year-old, but because they're technically over the age of 18, when the pimps woo them, and you can't really show the force and fraud of coercion that Justin talked about because they think they're doing it willingly. We're seeing a lot of that. And I think that does require the change in law. And I was so grateful to see that, I think, in a press release that you put out.
You said my name, but we'll give credit where it belongs, Justin and Melissa and others for flagging that issue and really bringing it to the fore. We have a question in the chat, which Jayne, I think follows a bit on what you said. So rather than kind of sit on ceremony and take things and wait on that, I'll just read it and if you tell me we should hold it, we will. The question is, it's sad to learn that many of the human trafficking victims are underage. is there a legal distinction between child abuse and human trafficking for those who are minors?
Justin, do you want to take that or do you want me to, or does it matter?
Sure. I think just to give a little bit of clarity to what you already explained, Jayne. Under our law, if someone either profits from or advances the prostitution of someone who is 18 or younger, who is under 18, then that is sex trafficking of a child, and there is no necessity under the law to prove force, fraud, or coercion. So that's what, when Jayne says there's a difference in how law enforcement approaches a survivor who's younger than 18 and a survivor who's older than 18, there is a legal reason for that. It is very often hard for us to prove the force element of trafficking because many traffickers are smart enough to issue their threats in private. They're not texting their threats. And so, we often use social media and phone evidence and other ways to prove the force, fraud, or coercion in our adult cases because we have to. But in cases involving survivors who are younger than 18, there isn't that element. And so that does make it easier for us to prove the trafficking.
Thank you, Justin. And thanks for the questions. We'll try to get to as many as that are put in the Q&A field. Dawn, I wanted to ask you, sort of follow on to what some of the things that Pamela was saying. Curious to know, the steps that Girl Vow is taking to reach the most vulnerable members of our community. In particular, thinking about your background, with youth development in the DA's office, working with the Department of Juvenile Justice, how you draw upon, because I just mentioned two, but a variety of experiences to reach the most vulnerable in our communities.
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. And I kind of like to piggyback off the previous conversation that Pamela and Jayne had, because there were so many things that came to my mind as the discussion was happening, particularly thinking about law enforcement. So I work, of course, like many of us, we work with a disenfranchised community that oftentimes separates itself from law enforcement, right? Because there's this idea and there's this thinking that law enforcement does not care about the people that it serves all the time. And so I think about the young people that do not want to actually even speak to law enforcement because they believe they don't trust in the government. They don't trust in the services. They don't trust in the belief and the idea and the thinking that law enforcement is going to serve them properly. I even think about some of the young people that we are in contact with who are in those relationships, as Pamela and Jayne discussed, with their trafficker. And they unfortunately are dealing with what's considered Stockholm Syndrome, right? The idea or the idea that I'm in love with my trafficker because primarily, most likely, that person has been in the foster care system, that person has been incarcerated, that person has been somehow left out of the day-to-day love and care and concern that most young people need, that we all need rather, in order to survive. And so a young person that's dealing with a trafficker and only knows a trafficker and only knows that life is going to be dealing with a lot mentally, emotionally, dealing with a particular type of person that really does not, care for them. So they're not going to be as attuned to talking to law enforcement due to fear and due to thinking that law enforcement really doesn't care. It even brings to mind a family that I think of who tried to actually she tried to actually, she tried to actually go to the precinct and make a police report because her sister was being abused. She was being trafficked. And because she was homeless, the police officer failed and did not want to actually create the police report. So just thinking about all those things and thinking about young people and thinking about the realities of the population that we work with that have been so conditioned to not trust in law enforcement, and the fact that they are so impacted in a negative way when it comes to law enforcement. And it's not to say that all law enforcement is the same in terms of not caring about the population, but there's a reality that there are some that are not concerned with the realities of what's happening with the population. And so going back to the question in terms of the work that we're doing. So some of the work that we do, we work on Rikers Island juvenile facilities. We've done everything from remove girls from trap houses to helping girls who have been drug addicted, making sure that they have a safe space, making sure that they have mental health, life skills, making sure that they have stipend funding programs and can go into college. We've worked with young people, even in psych wards. We've gone into psych wards to help young people, to help restore them. And of course, when you're dealing with young people, you're also dealing with their families. So being able to help their families as well. And in terms of moving into restoration has been really important and it's critical. To create a program of peer services where young girls that have experienced sex trafficking, they have experienced abuse and even incest, right? So when we think about sex trafficking, let's also think about the fact that incest happens, and you have there may be a situation where a young person has been introduced to sex trafficking through their father, through their sister, through their sibling. So those are the realities of a lot of those things that happen. And as we meet those young people, one of the things that we have to do at Girl Fight is be able to meet them where they are. And in closing, I also think about a young girl that comes to mind, who she's been involved in sex work for some time. And whenever I talk to her, she's always in such great distress. And as she's in distress, she knows that she wants to lead the life, but she doesn't know how to get out, right? Because she's been connected to this trafficker for so long, and he has such a grasp and a hold on her that she knows not only does he own her, but she owes him. And that's really important because a lot of it is mental in terms of what girls think and how they see the relationship that they're in with that particular trafficker that defines their life and defines what sex work looks like for them. And this is why I'm so glad that that the DA recently announced supporting the immunity bill so that sex workers can actually report any type of criminal activity that has happened without being prosecuted. That's so very important because now it gives young people and it gives people who are involved in sex trafficking a different opportunity to think that maybe perhaps law enforcement does care about them when in fact they've always believed that that's not true because they don't trust the system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Melissa, and this may hopefully be responsive to a couple of questions that have come in, but starting, what in general are the services, most needed by the survivors who come through, our office, to the DA's office?
Yeah, well, as Dawn mentioned, there's so many needs, and no matter what point you meet this survivor population, they are in need of usually everything. And it starts with like the basic needs. So we're thinking shelter, food, clothing, housing resources, a support network, a community organization that is available to take them on, and a lot of these service needs as well, safety planning. But I want to highlight one of the services that I really value so strongly, and a lot of the work that we do in the office is the clinical therapeutic services, because as everyone's mentioned, there's so much trauma. There's so much to work through. There's often like layers and layers of victimizations. This victimization is so humiliating and extremely difficult to work through, let alone talk about. So it's a service need that we really value so strongly from the beginning. So this person has access to free trauma-informed therapy from the beginning to the very end. But of course, we really, of course, emphasize the community organizations that are on this panel and many of the others in New York City who can really take on and help shepherd the way.
And I think there's a question here. I think picks up on what you were just highlighting, kind of the distinction between you're in the office and obviously those providing services outside of it. And so the question is, and I don't know if you know the answer, I don't know it offhand, but is it typical to have a social worker embedded in this type of function? And why have it versus having the service be outside of the office?
It's so valuable. From early on, we saw like a lot of this population, as you see, all the barriers, all the system failures. And a lot of the work we do in the human trafficking response unit is repairing all the failures the system has given them, straight from childhood foster care systems to the criminal justice system. So we're really trying to show a different perception of what it could be, and we also prove it through our action. We prove to survivors that this is a good experience. And I have to say, often after a case is over, the survivor's like, wait, I want to keep coming back here. Can you bring me back? I want to spend time with you guys. You guys are amazing. You're inspiring me. Sometimes they leave wanting to work with the criminal justice system. They want to be lawyers. They want to be police officers, social workers. So it's really quite inspiring. And I don't think it's typical, but I think definitely for this group, this population, it's so valuable to help also at the same time advocate internally. So a lot of the social workers' responsibility is to help understand the survivor the best we can, help give them voice, help make them a big part of the team, because it's also at the end of the day, they're the experts. They're the ones who know what happened to them more than any of us. And they're at the end of the day, the ones that help us really solve the problem.
If it's okay, can I just piggyback back on that?
No, and
Because
that would be great. I think we've moved to the part where we're just be completely interactive. So please run with it, Jayne.
Good. Because I really think that having the social worker makes all the difference in the world. I think Dawn mentioned this. A lot of the young people I work with are not comfortable with law enforcement. They've had very bad experiences just in systems throughout their lives. And what I love about the anti-trafficking unit in this DA's office is that they'll work with a young person where they are. Like, so for the first meeting, they come to us, right? Like, our young people are afraid to go to a building with law enforcement. So for that first meeting, Justin, Melissa will come to us. We're at a place where the young person feels comfortable. And I've had several young people say, like, I want nothing to do with law enforcement. Like, they kind of want their pimp in jail, but they're afraid. And I'm like, you know what? You don't have to commit to anything, but will you please just talk to Melissa, or Justin? And then they come to us. And then once they've sat and listened to Melissa, they're like, okay, I want to do this. So I think that social worker role is pivotal. And when that's not there, it's just much less likely that the young person wants to continue with the case. And I can attest to many of my young people are like, can I still talk to Melissa now that the case is over? And I'm like, yes, she'll be happy to speak to you.
Yeah,
So I think we need that in all DA's offices. I don't think they all have it. And I think it's so important.
Yeah, I would just say, just so the audience understands, we see supporting survivors as an equal part of our mission. Even though we're a prosecutor's office, even though we are very focused on prosecuting traffickers and holding traffickers accountable, we see supporting survivors as an equal part of what we do every day. And so having someone like Melissa, who can be very often the first face that a survivor sees when they walk into this office, sends that message. We are here first and foremost to help this survivor. What we want more than anything is for that survivor to be able to leave their trafficker and go on with their lives and not be victimized and not be abused, and to deal with the real trauma that they have experienced. Then by supporting that survivor, by helping that survivor get to a place where they have dealt with the trauma and they can see their lives without having a trafficker, that's when we get to the other part of our mission, which is holding that trafficker accountable. But having Melissa is absolutely an essential part of what we do. And I think it really does speak to our mission, which is to support survivors.
And that's so important because our survivors need that support. They need that safety net. They need to know that there's someone there that's going to be there for them and protect them. And as we all know, and we've said it throughout the call, is most of the survivors, the victims, are not comfortable speaking to law enforcement. Because there's a stigma. There's also a misunderstanding. I believe that our law enforcement should also be trained further into what is human trafficking, so that the victim is not viewed as a criminal, and once that area is addressed, and the victim sees that they can go and speak to someone, if there's a social worker there, if there's a human trafficking unit that really is tapped in to their needs, then I think that would help a lot of what's going on within the human trafficking area, because at this point, they're being traumatized again. Yeah, if they're coming to seek assistance, or if they're going to Covenant House, or if they're going to Dawn, and they're saying, and we're saying, okay, well, let's report this. They don't want to report it, because then they have to tell the story over and over again. And so now they're being re-traumatized. And so not only do we need social workers, but we need trauma therapists. We need to a really a holistic approach. Yes, we do. We want to get the traffickers off of the streets, but we also want to build resilience in our survivors. And we can't just bring them in, have them testify, and say, okay, you're good now, you go on about life. No, because the only thing that they know is the life. So now we have to change the trajectory of their thinking and give them resources and give them connection so that they can grow and excel. So I know Melissa is doing a wonderful job, and if we could clone her throughout New York, I think that would probably be really helpful. GA, I don't know if you can work on that, but yeah, this is what we need. This is definitely what we need.
Yeah, I don't have cloning powers. We're gonna try to hold on to it. I know other folks who are zooming in looking, but we want her here. I do also want to acknowledge our investigators who are also critical to the case development team. There are a number of questions I'm going to try to kind of maybe pull. Well, I was going to save this to the end, but a number of people are asking it, and I think in some ways it may be the most important question, which is, what should people do if they suspect trafficking? Who should they report to? What steps should they take? And I was going to end with that, but a number of people are asking that, and I think in some ways, if that's the lead message, what should people do? Who should they go to? And I just throw that open to everyone.
Well, I'll say for our part, we do have at the Manhattan DA's office our own trafficking hotline. It is run through our unit. We take all calls that come in. It is not an emergency line. So if you do suspect that someone is in an emergency, then you should call 911. You should please report it to the police. But if you have a suspicion about trafficking, someone that you know or something that's happening in your community, you can call us. The number is 212-335-3400. As I said, it is staffed by our unit. And we will take any information you give us, and we will make every effort to track down as much as we can to try to figure out what's going on. That's why we have dedicated investigators. That's why we have investigative analysts, so that we can do that work. So we are certainly one resource, but I know Jayne and Dawn and Pamela are also great resources, so I'll let them talk about other ways that you can report that's not directly to law enforcement.
I actually thought the question, DA, was going to go into what can the public do to help prevent trafficking? Because reporting is harder, right? Like for us, we work on building a relationship, and you often don't know, and you absolutely do not. When I first started at Covenant House, I knew where all the pimps and traffickers were around Covenant House, and I was so tempted to go up to them myself. You do not want to do that, because that's putting yourself in danger. So I think, what you really can do is call hotlines and get help from people who are professionals, and make sure you're not putting yourself in danger. But I think an easier answer is, what can the public do to prevent trafficking? And Pamela and Dawn have both touched on this. When I talk to my young people about what was different in their life, what might have prevented these experiences, I always get one of three answers, right? one adult who cared about me, right? One adult who gave a damn about me, a place to stay, or job training and education, right? You know, a young person living on the street, they don't got a high school diploma, who is going to hire them, right? The strip club. And then the strip club often leads to prostitution and human trafficking. And so I always tell the staff at Covenant House, like, it doesn't matter what department you are, it is our jobs to get to these young people before the pimps do, right? Because my young people have told me that the first person who have ever given them a hug was their pimp, right? The first person to ever give them a birthday cake was their pimp. So just being that adult who cares, and I know it's a tough ask, but being a good foster parent, those are the heroes of human trafficking prevention, right? Because if they, like, it's kids who've been bounced to home with no love in their life, are so ready to fall into the hands of pimps. So being that mentor, being that foster care parent.
Yeah, can I just add to particularly what Jayne said in regards to foster care? You know, think about the young child who's in the foster care system all their life. They're being trained for life, right? So they're being trained to travel from home to home, to constantly meet new people. And so what happens when sex trafficking occurs? The same exact thing, right? So people, so what happens? The same exact thing, right? So young people are actually learning that it's okay to travel from home to home and from place to place, because they already received that groundwork in the foster care system. So when Jayne talks about being a good foster care parent, that's so important, because young people, they need consistency. They need to know that no matter what, that someone is going to show up for them, whether it be for a test prep, whether it be for a game, whether it be a concern that they're having. They need consistency, and also mentorship. Mentorship is very important. Taking on a young person, participating in a mentoring program, and helping the young person and seeing them throughout life, no matter what mistakes they make or what trials and tribulations that they may experience, but also just being consistent with them through their trials and tribulations. Oftentimes, you know, I get conversations and questions rather from parents, and they say, well, I don't know what to do because these are my negative experiences with my child. And one of the things that I always say with them is you have to walk with them through the process. So it's so very important in thinking about preventing sex trafficking. And I also want to touch on what Jayne said in regards to not approaching sex traffickers. This is something that I've done before. And even with gang members, we've had young people who are involved in gangs and they're sex trafficking through gangs. But if I know a young person has a court case and we're advocating for them in court, one of our role is to be able to tie to those relationships that young person has. So one of those things that we've done sometimes is actually create relationships with gang members to make sure that our young person gets support, so they're not experiencing any negative consequences from not attending court hearing. So, you know, all those things have been like so important and so integral in order for us to make sure that we can prevent young people from being going back into the system and dealing with all the inconsistencies of life that happens when no one cares for them.
So we have a few questions. Thanks so much, Dawn. And I'm gonna try to combine a couple of questions here. There are a couple about sort of social media and I would say kind of back page and sort of posting platforms. So I'll pick one of them out. Can you explain some of the ways in which social media use can be used as a form of coercion? I think we heard, Pamela, I think you talked about it a little bit earlier and some others, but some more on, this is where social media, particularly, the age population that you've been talking about.
This is where a lot of it begins. Our youth spend an exorbitant amount of time on social media. I call it that they have drifted into fantasy island. They have created this space for themselves where they're connecting with people that don't really know them because they don't want to or cannot exist in their current world. And that's where the traffickers will find a lot of our youth, is by reading their posts, viewing their pictures. We put up everything on social media. Our youth post everything. And I think Jayne said it. These traffickers are extremely intelligent. They are, I mean, a lot of them could be our top social workers because they listen, they pay attention to their victims and they plan out. It doesn't just happen. They plan out. They are wooing our victim, their victims. They're looking at the one or two phrases that are constantly coming up on these social media pages, that this young girl is constantly saying, oh, he didn't call me back. Oh, I don't care. You know, my parents did this. My mother doesn't listen to me. No, I'm failing in school. All of these things. And this trafficker is looking, and he's building a whole case on how he's going to woo this person. And it is that they're building a relationship. It's a detrimental relationship. It's a life-threatening relationship. But in this young person's mind, they're building a relationship. And what the going back to the question before about how do we stop this is we need to be present in our youth life. I mean, it bothers me so much to see a 6-year-old where the parent is just handing a phone to the 6-year-old child as opposed to spending time with them. Mentoring, foster care, you have to be present in the child's life so that the trafficker does not have an opportunity to become the end all to be all. We need to love on the youth. We need to encourage them. If they do something wrong, fine, let's correct it in love. But we cannot, because the more that we're ignoring them, the more that they're grabbing the laptop and the phones, the farther they're getting away from us and the closer that they're getting to the traffickers. So the one thing that we need to do with the social media is we need to be parents. We need to be adults. We don't need to be afraid to take the phone away. I had a mother call me up and she was afraid that her daughter, because her daughter was screaming and hollering because she took the phone away. I said, so then maybe you should sit down with her and create a plan and say, okay, you want to be on the phone. This is the amount of time that you're going to be on the phone. Now, after that, we're going to spend time together so that there's a connection. And the whole thing is don't let social media be your child's your child's parent, because that's what it's becoming. And we're losing our children to that fact.
So this may take us, thank you, Pamela, to the end of our time. But we've been talking a lot about enforcement, talked a little bit about policy, but wanted to throw it open to sort of what policy changes should we be thinking about to better address human trafficking?
Well, if I could say, for the lawyers who are on, I want to give the code words before we close. The code word is anti-trafficking. The code word is anti-trafficking. I would say, DA Bragg, in response to that question, I think this also touches on what many of the panelists have said, but we know that for many, many, many years, law enforcement criminalized survivors of trafficking. And we, in fact, were prosecuting the survivors of trafficking for the crimes that they were committing at the behest of their traffickers. And one of the major policy changes that has just taken effect, and which you, DA Bragg, have, I think, so moved to the center of our practice, is the new law called the START Act, which allows us to vacate convictions for survivors that are related to their trafficking. And under your leadership, we have vacated now 9 and counting of those motions, which are convictions that span the gamut, crimes that include prostitution, which is obvious to many people, but also things like robbery, carrying guns for traffickers. We have vacated those convictions that have so hampered those survivors and their ability to move forward. And we are really continuing to do that. So in terms of a policy change that is really making a difference, I think that's one of them. One of the bills that you've proposed in conjunction with Senator Cordell Clear is a bill.
It look like I fed you the questions, Justin. You got to start taking more credit for your own work. Start at that's his work. He's driving, and I'm saying go do that. Yes, please. So take credit for your own work.
Will do. The only other thing I wanted to point out was there is a bill that's now in front of the legislature that was proposed by Senator Cordell Clear that would eliminate the statute of limitations for sex trafficking cases. And it really, I think, could work very well with our START Act work, because as survivors are now coming forward and having the courage to talk about their trafficking, we would like to open investigations into those traffickers, but because of the statute of limitations, we're often prevented from doing so. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to plug that bill, because we really do think that would make a difference in terms of our ability to now use this information to hold traffickers accountable.
And if I could add, the reason that bill is so important is that survivors are often just not ready to deal with law enforcement, right? They need to take care of their mental health first. They need to take care of their housing needs first. They need to get like a job first. So they need time, and that time can be years before they're ready to deal with the prosecution of their abuser. So the statute of limitations being extended is absolutely necessary. And then I would also add, again, I saw it in a press release by you, DA Bragg, about maybe making it a crime specifically to prostitute people with intellectual disabilities, because I'm seeing a lot of that. And perhaps maybe also recruiting outside of these pimps are brazen. They're outside of youth, like child welfare homes. They're outside of homeless youth shelters. They're outside of schools. So maybe we can look at some policy about creating a crime specifically in recruiting in those areas.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Because in my travels, one of the things that were also very important are the visas, and making sure that immigrants actually have the ability to be protected under the visas. And the other thing is that when I worked for the DA's office in the past in the Bronx, there was like a considerable backlog. And I don't know if that's still happening, but that's also something that I think that's very important and also should be looked into in terms of the visas.
Go ahead, Justin.
We certainly support survivors in obtaining immigration relief whenever it is possible. And thankfully, there is a T visa for trafficking survivors. And so we do certify those applications for our survivors. As everyone here knows, very often it is our undocumented community that is victimized by traffickers, particularly labor trafficking. And very often it is because of their immigration status that their traffickers are able to control them, because they are so understandably afraid of being deported. And so we do our best to support survivors as much as we can in obtaining immigration relief. Unfortunately, the backlog is a federal problem, so we really don't have any responsibility for how long it takes for these visas to get through the system. That's entirely done through the federal government, but we do regularly connect survivors to immigration attorneys, and we do whatever we can to support their visa applications.
So I think we are at time. Want to do a couple of housekeeping things based upon things in the Q&A. There's been question about the recording. We've been recording. I mentioned the CLE, and so we'll send an email out. We'll try to capture some of the information. I see people now posting in the chat their contact information. The chat, I believe, is only going to it's not going to everyone, just the panelists. So in the email we send out, some of our panelists are agreeing to provide their information, which I think is responsive to a number of the questions about what people should do as next steps. We've also had some attendees put information in the chat about the services they provide, specifically New York State Department of Criminal Justice Services and St. John of the Divine and others. And so we will try to put that in the email, which primarily will be for CLE credit, but we'll have hopefully put some other information about resources. So thanks to everyone who attended. Thanks for the very kind of active Q&A from the attendees, and thanks most panelists for joining us for this hour. You hear all the work they're doing. So it's like an hour from the hard work they're doing to spread the word. So thank them for joining us and thank them for the work that they're doing every day. And we look forward to continue to work together in partnership. So thank you so much and have a great afternoon.